Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Ben Backus.
And I'm Kevin Paulin, and welcome to the Falling Up Podcast, where we have conversations about turning obstacles into opportunities. And on today's show, we have the pleasure of being joined by Miss Camille Roach.
This episode has been a long time coming, as Camille is one of the co-founders and is the assistant executive director of Winning Ways. And in this episode, Camille shares her story of overcoming obstacles and truly turning them into opportunities and giving back to the community.
So without further ado, welcome to the Falling Up Podcast. Speaking of shining, like a diamond, I'm on my game today. I'm on my A game today, you hear me?
He's in rare form today.
Oh, listen, we gotta.
He's been feeling good of late.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a blessing to be a blessing. You know, so I'm on the positive. I'm on the up and up. Everything is just good, you know. And if it's bad, then it's good, because that bad's gonna turn to good eventually anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you're grinding now.
I'm
actually.
It's wintertime.
Yeah.
So I can shine in the summer. Yeah.
All comes back. Comes full circle.
Spring is always gonna come. We're in the winter now, but spring's coming. It's guaranteed. Can't stop it. So, why complain?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But today, I'm bringing my A game because I got we have a special guest today, and I'm thrilled. I'm very happy to be here with you here with us. I guess this is the first time that we don't have a guest. Shout out to Andrew, but we ain't put that out. Maybe one day. But other than Andrew, yeah, you're a guest, I guess.
I ain't a guest.
You know what I'm saying? Would you consider it? It's not a guest.
I'm like a hidden sister.
Yeah, I don't even know about hidden.
I'm not really hidden, but
yeah, I don't know about hidden. Well, yeah, if you know us, then you know you. You know.
Long time coming. This conversation happens more often than not. It's just not recorded.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I've been kind of preparing for today. It has made me do a lot of thinking, and just something that I think a lot about are kind of the unintended consequences of life and the unintended consequences of action. So when we went on this journey and kind of founded Winning Ways, there was no thought about necessarily the connections and the people that we were going to meet along the journey. It was more, hey, there's this goal in front of us, and let's find a way to do it. And something that I think is so true in so many parts of life, you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And when you open a door that you haven't opened before, you have no idea what's going to be behind it. And that can be really terrifying, and it can also be really beautiful. And yeah, I don't even remember when it would have been, 2017, 18, something like that.
Yeah, like a midway point.
Yeah, I think somewhere in that time was the first time that I know we had worked for the same company, but never really had.
Never crossed. We've all worked for the same agency, and kind of, me and Kevin had that conversation where we passed each other.
Yeah.
Nothing hostile or anything. We worked and kind of passed each other and kept going.
Right.
And that's kind of how it led up. And it really wasn't until me and Kevin were like, I was leaving a position, Kevin was taking my old position, and something in me said, say something. You know, this goal of mine and re-entry was kind of sitting there in my head by myself. So something said, say something. And I did. And with good reason, because now we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that goes to kind of those unintended consequences where you just meet and form these relationships along the way that help not only your goal externally progress in life, but also internally. Like, I think in watching and getting to know you, right, like it inspires me to do more with my day. Because I know how busy you are and how chaotic life can be, yet you still are able to show up and maintain this level of grace and professionalism that trickles down to everyone you touch. So I very much have been looking forward to today and kind of jumping more into the nitty gritty and getting to know how you got to where you are and what has inspired you to be able to, lead a life of service. Because, so many of our guests are in this field, but there's a difference between showing up and going to work and being of service. And I see that, and I'm by no means saying that our other guests aren't doing that, because they certainly have. I just don't get to see that day to day, so I kind of have to take what they're saying at face value, essentially. Yeah. Whereas with you, I know you're walking the walk. So just to really jump into today, can you just let our listeners know kind of who you are and where your journey started?
I'm like one of the most modest people. Yeah. Because for me, it was just life. Just the standpoint to be able to survive was like the biggest thing. I actually didn't know anything about human services. The most when you're growing up is be a nurse, especially in my family. Be a nurse and get a state job. My family's not from here. So they go for what makes them money to survive. Back home, you'd be lucky to have a pair of shoes on your feet. So with that being said, I went to nursing school, but I also had a little girl who suffered from epilepsy. And it made it very difficult for me to go to class when I'm in and out of the hospital with her. And before you know it, I'm failing classes because I have to choose. Do I be a mom or do I be a nurse? In that aspect, and, losing jobs because I have to choose to work or be a mom. And I chose a mom every single time. So with that being said, I went to my counselor and I said, I don't know what to do. I said, my daughter is in and out of the hospital. I need to finish school. What do I do? And nursing school seems to not be working because I'm failing. So she said, what about human services? I said, I don't even know what human services is. But what I found over time is that I had been doing it indirectly for so long, I didn't know it was an actual field. So what I mean by that is when I worked in pharmacy, if somebody came with a prescription and they couldn't pay, I would probably take the time and help them figure out how to apply for state insurance so that they could pay for their insurance. These are little things that I would do here. Now apply for food stamps, things like that we do came second nature for me to do. So where I was in school and my GPA was like a 1.35 in nursing, I was able to excel in human services and graduate with like a 3.7 GPA, which was like, oh shoot, I can do this.
Yeah.
So it was almost like the goodness of fit, where
right.
Nursing, it just felt like, hey, was it like I'm forcing this profession or I'm forcing this field because this is what people are telling me I'm supposed to do? And then I get to human services and it feels more natural, or did you just find it easier content?
It just felt like nursing. It was like, all right, you're a female and you should be in nursing. There wasn't really like when you're in school, they don't kind of break down different careers. You just kind of you see the cops come in, you see the firefighters come in, you see that type of stuff. You never saw a case manager or any, a therapist or anything like that in a job fair or a college fair or anything like that. So you even knew that that world even exists, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
So
you were fortunate enough to have a guidance counselor steer you in that direction.
Right. So it was more like here is this profession, and most students who don't do well for whatever reason in nursing school tend to excel in human services. And it felt like second nature in class. I would be able to articulate anything that was thrown at me through that time to be able to then make it make sense and then use that to help and advocate. I don't like to say advocate, more like educate. Because whether I'm going for a particular population, my job in that role is to educate everybody else who doesn't know or understand what's going on in that time. So
just taking a step back, because I know you said, I know, but for our listeners, where's your family from?
So my mom is from St. Vincent in the Grenadine Islands. My dad and his family is from Guyana. So they kind of came over really young. My mom was 12. I don't know when my dad came over. So I still have some family there. and most of my family is here. They kind of spread out over the time. So when they came here, it was more like most of my family are either cops or COs, and the females are nurses. So
It's like fall in line.
yeah, it was like fall in line, but I really felt like I was that one that would go against the grain, per se. In family life and, boy, professionally. I'm the one that likes to rock the boat.
Well, you only like to ask questions.
I like to ask questions and expect answers that make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just not just go with it because they just say it.
Just tell me that the sky is blue because it's blue. No, it's orange, and I want to know why it turned orange.
Right.
That type of thing.
Yeah.
So, in just touching on what you mentioned, kind of opening there, something that really stems out, and I've seen it more than ever now in my life over these past couple weeks, is kind of, you're referring to the hierarchy of needs. If my basic needs aren't met, what else matters?
Right.
And that becomes really hard. And, we had to cancel a podcast, I think it was last week, because, I was going through hell.
Yeah.
And everything else became work. I couldn't show up to work. I couldn't function. And everything else becomes so secondary in those moments where it really is like, how do I survive? And I can speak for myself, what really made that clear was being able to process it with people, being able to talk it out, being able to get good, relatively unbiased. Obviously, when you're dealing with friends, there's always going to be some level of bias in there, right?
Yeah.
But it was good feedback that gave me a path forward and allowing myself to be as vulnerable as I was capable of being in that moment. So when you're talking about, the experiences that you went through where education was secondary, everything seemed secondary. How did you work through that? Were there specific things, or did it just feel like, hey, I'm on autopilot and I'm surviving?
If I can never say anything, mental health is real. The Caribbean culture doesn't believe in that piece. Mm-hmm. And that's where it starts, that baseline. I'm from a culture that doesn't believe that mental health is an actual issue. So for me to be in such a vulnerable state, I have a kid that can go into a seizure at any point and may not survive. Melissa has been intubated. They're bringing priests and stuff to me. And I'm like, no, we're not doing this. She's 2 years old. You have to do something. You can't say that this is it. It's like I was by myself. You know what I mean? In a very dark place where I had nobody to turn to. So I had to take a step and just center myself as a whole and figure out what that meant for myself. So what I mean by that is I had to just stop and just wait and see, all right, what's more important right now? I can't be no help to my daughter unless I'm helpful to myself first, and to know that I can break through this by breathing and just taking what's priority and going from there. Because when you're, again, going against the grain and, nothing's wrong with you, but nothing seems to bring you happiness, joy, anything, because you have to be strong for everybody else, who's left for me?
So it's like pouring out, but no one else is pouring in.
Right.
Draining.
And you got to get up every single day. My sisters are like, come on, we never see you cry. I said, because Alyssa can't see me cry. Because she can't, that weakness I can't show, but that doesn't mean on the inside, I'm not breaking down. So it's like, all right, every day, get up. Bills don't stop. Mm-hmm. Things don't stop because she's in the hospital. They just kept going and overflowing and things like that. And you make do. Some people can handle it in a particular type of way, and some don't survive. And that's why suicide ends up being the way that it is. Because they feel like nobody's there for them. And it has been there. I've been an open book with that, to know that I've had at least 2 suicidal attempts, but just knew that I'm meant for more than that. So.
Yeah. Here for a reason.
Absolutely.
So, and I don't know, because I guess I don't have this answer for myself in terms of how do you get through that? What was your process where you said certainly prioritizing, right? But when it felt like, hey, I'm in this alone and I don't have that support, how did you get that support, or how did you make it through?
I have a little person to live for, because it was just one. It was me and Alyssa. And every time, no matter how many times she was in the hospital, no matter how many times, like, she can't remember my name, remember how to count, anything, she always had a smile on her face. Every single time. EEG probes, everything. Sit there, heads wrapped up in the hospital for weeks. Still smiling, still laughing, still looking at the best of what her life is. If she doesn't feel sorry for herself, why should I feel sorry for her? So with that being said, if she's strong enough to get through it, I'm strong enough, or should be strong enough, to meet her halfway. And we'll go through this battle together. And thankfully, Alyssa's 14 years old, no seizure free, just a happy freshman in high school. I couldn't be, and I wouldn't be able to see that. Still smiling.
Still smiling.
So really finding that, in this case, almost external motivator. That was like, I need to do it
right
for this.
It is hard. It is not something that I would say is easy to do. You definitely have to have some self-worth, or at least see that it may not be strong self-worth, but just enough to get me through, and just to know, because with that, we lost everything because of just being in the hospital. But, I had to go to school. I had to finish for her. I needed to be an example for her. And quite frankly, if that meant that we would pack up and take the bus for 3 hours to go to class, and we would take a blanket and lunch and sit on campus, and she would go to every class with me faithfully. So
all while dealing with seizures.
I'm humble. That means I had to wait tables for $5 an hour. I was waiting tables for $5 an hour.
What this makes me really think of is patience and persistence.
That's it.
And recognizing that when we're in a hole, there is no shortcut to getting out. And it is going to be painful, but I think, like the yin and the yang, right? There's these equal sides of the scale. If I've experienced this much pain, I can only experience this much pleasure. When I've experienced this much pain, my pleasure threshold also increases. And it becomes meaningful, and also you develop real skills, right? Like resiliency is a word that screams out here. And resiliency is not something that people naturally have, right? It's something that is tested and it's acquired and it's built through overcoming very specific obstacles. Yeah, it's inspiring and it's fascinating. And I think the part that I know I've gotten lost with is the just not being patient and wanting that switch to happen immediately. And hey, there's this really painful moment. I just want it to be over, and I don't want to have to go through the work.
Where's the end piece?
Right.
All right, like the TikToks. All right, here's hard part's over. Here you go. Here's the end results.
And you want to know the crazy thing too? After making it through those moments, reflecting back, like, those are the moments that I felt most alive. It's a really weird thought to think back to specific obstacles that in the moment felt insurmountable, can't get through. And then you get through and it's almost like, oh, now I want to seek these types of things out, but I don't want to seek out the pain that's associated with it.
Right.
But those moments, there's something very special to them.
And you're not numb.
Right.
You're feeling everything. I think you're not living if you're numb, So while you go through it, you can feel not tangible, but feel the ups and downs of it.
Yeah, see, I'm experiencing this for the first time at this point in my life. Right? Like where you say you're not numb. I think for myself, like I've been numb for a very, very long time. And I've been good at overcoming very specific tasks and moving forward, but not processing the feelings that go with that.
Right.
And it is this fine balance, I think, between feeling and moving forward.
I think the problem is, ultimately, as a society, we are becoming way too used to dealing with trauma. Trauma is a part of our lives, and it's more like expected.
Right.
Where we should be expecting happiness and not, most of the time when people ask me, Camille, you're busy all the time. When do you sleep? What is your norm? And I say, this is my norm.
This is my baseline.
Right. This is my baseline. Unfortunately, for some people who watch me on a day-to-day, will say that that's an unhealthy norm. But for me, it's been my norm for so long that if I do scale back, that would be, something traumatic for me.
Yeah. And what you're saying, I've spent a remarkable amount of time thinking about this double-edged sword. When we identify a problem, so many times the problem's here, so we swing the pendulum so far over here, and it creates equal problems. So I think the fact that we're openly talking about mental health in society regularly, right, which is something that is relatively new to, I'll say, the past decade or so.
Yeah.
In so many ways, I think we've normalized it to a problem level, meaning if you look at the number, we've changed criteria in the DSM to essentially make it so every single human could be at some level diagnosed with a depressive or an anxiety disorder, right? Mm-hmm. When some of these things are just, it's life, right? It's the equation. If I don't do good things, why am I going to feel well? I struggle with really trying to empathize with the really open mental health talk, but also trying to reel it back in and say, hey, this is just being human, right? This is life. We're supposed to, if I go through a troubling situation, I'm supposed to not feel well, right? And then I can use that as motivators to develop skills and develop things that are going to allow me to become resilient, allow me to overcome. And then the next obstacle that's in my way, I now have this new skill set to deal with it. And hopefully I can turn that pain level down a little bit, right? If on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being perfect, 10 being the worst pain ever, if I go through a really hard thing and I'm at an 8, well, next time I go through something, maybe I can turn it down to a 6 and I can get through it a little more gracefully. But does that mean that I'm a depressed person and I have a depressive disorder, or does it just mean that this is a life situation that if I took any 10 random people and put them through it, wouldn't they have the same feelings and ideas that I'm going through?
Yeah, is it a disorder, or is it a temporary thing that should truly develop you anyway, right?
Right, but that's exactly it. And how do we be able to have that conversation without putting down true mental health? Right. And I think that like separating those ideas is so hard to tease apart.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And it's just something I think a lot about, right? Because I work with a lot of individuals who will, self-proclaim, hey, I have severe depression. Yet when they make behavioral changes, the depression fades. And when I think of clinical depression where, hey, from a biological standpoint, don't have the adequate amount of neurotransmitters, be it dopamine or serotonin, that allow me to kind of regulate and keep this equilibrium balance of feeling all right? Like that's what there are without a doubt individuals for a variety of reasons that just have less dopamine than others, right? And like that I look at as clinical depression versus individuals who through their choices and behaviors and choices might not actually be the right word, because for so many people we only know. Yeah, it's like, is it really a choice if I only see this one option and I don't know what I don't know, right? But through behaviors would naturally lead someone to feeling down. And I think if we can really identify that and speak to it, now that empowers people rather than saying, oh, I'm depressed, I have this disorder, I have this real problem, that almost relinquishes control.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Hell yeah.
I know I'm walking into or I don't really walk, but rolling into a very taboo
Well,
topic.
it's got to be. I mean, ultimately, the only way that we evolve as a society is that we speak about the things that are quote unquote taboo. Like for me, the DSM-5 is, it's a mental health book. We all, we've been through it,
Yep.
but it's really a person guideline. It is a handbook for human beings. You want to know why? There is not one person walking the planet who doesn't have a diagnosis out of the DSM-5. And if there is, they belong in a mental facility because there's no such thing as a norm. We can have the same diagnosis. They can all come from different traumas within our lives, and we can all deal with them in different ways. Why? Because the way you deal with things is what makes you Ben. The way Kevin deals with things makes him Kevin. And the way I deal with things makes me Camille. You can have a set of twins sitting in the same environment. They're not going to walk the same path.
Right.
They're not going to feel the same feelings, even though they were raised in the same environment. That's just what it is. So when things happen, especially when you're talking about taboo topics, one thing that I will stand true to and why, I love winning ways the way I do is that the challenging thought process. When I had to pick my dissertation for my doctoral program, I chose to do on incarceration and reentry. Yep. And one of the things that, you guys know, I say this story all the time. One of the things that my school said was, Camille, would you say the same thing if you were a victim? I said, who said I wasn't a victim? I've been a victim. I've not been incarcerated, but my brothers have been incarcerated. My nephew is currently incarcerated. My friends have been incarcerated. A spouse of mine wasn't necessarily incarcerated, but was arrested. So I have been on both sides. I've been a family member and a victim of crimes. That still doesn't make my standpoint any different when writing my dissertation.
So can you tell us a little bit about the dissertation?
So my dissertation is based off of what I'd like to call the life sentence of a released prisoner. And what I feel is though, and people can argue with me and I'm perfectly okay with that. We live in a society that once an individual is released from incarceration, they're still in prison. They're not allowed to go to school. They can't get financial aid. They can't get benefits. They can't get housing. They can barely get a job. And you want to know why the recidivism rate is the way it is. They sat in front of a judge. They got their sentence. Once they've done their time, allow them to be released and live their life. If somebody feels as though, they committed a crime, they need to do more time, then we shouldn't be looking at the person. We should be looking at the justice system who gave them the sentencing.
Right.
If the judge felt that they needed more time, they should have given them more time. But once that time is set, if you're sentenced for 5 years and you did that 5 years, you should give the clean slate that you were said to be given once you finished. And you're not.
Right.
You're still in prison.
Yeah, the barriers are there still.
Right.
Yeah, it speaks to so many underlying issues. One, like, what is rehabilitation, right? Just defining that. And certainly it is without doubt a fact that we are doing a disservice to anyone that has made a mistake, right? Because we're not providing actual rehabilitation. We're not providing actual services. And like you said, you leave and you have all now these just barriers that stay with you, that for anyone to overcome, take away whatever events led them to that situation, right? Mm-hmm. But just the idea of, hey, it's hard for anyone to go to school.
Right.
It really is. Even if you have parents that do the whole process for you, it is still hard to go to school, right? And now you're taking someone who likely doesn't have the skills or the support to do this on their own, and you're making it even more challenging with this barrier that's associated with something that you should have already paid the price for.
Right.
And now so that speaks to a really, really hard thing. And again, that's what that's why we started Winning Ways, is to give people a chance to truly win at life. And something that is really unfortunate. And, you know, I want to spend my life doing and hopefully using the podcast as a platform is to really encourage people to carve their own path. Because if we're going to rely on the system to be fair, if we're going to rely on the system to do the job that it says it's going to do, we know where that leads to. Where, what if you're incarcerated before the age of 25? It's 80% plus recidivism rate that you're just going to be on this merry-go-round. And like, that's unacceptable.
In the first year,
that's
80%.
Unacceptable. And it goes back to opening this podcast where it's like, if you don't know what you don't know there's another way, you don't have the things in place, do you even have a true shot? And sure, you're going to have your anomalies that make it out and do incredible things, but if the majority is staying stuck, what can I feel like we have this obligation and this responsibility to try to do something different and to try to create new ways for people to grow and experience life. Our life is pretty cool today. So many things could have taken that away. So many things could have taken that away.
Yeah. Still can.
It truly.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to touch on something with the system, because I haven't said this on this podcast, but I say it a lot when I'm doing like speaking for myself or Winning Ways stuff. But the 13th Amendment, it states neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So in layman terms, if slavery was abolished in America, unless you're convicted of a felony. So the law of the land of this country says you're a slave if you get incarcerated. So for 7 years of my life, I was a slave. So many brothers and sisters are slaves as we speak. And just to go to your point, I think we have to understand that the system isn't broken. It's working. And it's working quite well. And the person has a lifetime sentence when they get released because they are a cash cow. Mm-hmm. They're manual labor. I was in Bayside State Prison. They make underwear. They bake bread. They do tags. They got sewing shops. They got they got a horticulture. There's a farm that I was at. They got cows. Dudes digging up cows, and they're wearing rubber pants to their fucking chests, and they're coming back from the farm, smell like shit all the way up here, and they're shoveling shit for the state of New Jersey. So when you really look at the system and what's been happening and why it was created as a different form or a more pleasant form of prison, that then if you put this guilt on that person, society could then say, oh, send them to prison for forever. When they come out, send them for prison for forever, but not thinking of the abuse of being a slave is. Because you can't tell me they're not slaves when the land says it's slave. They're slaves. We're slaves. You know what I'm saying? So, the lifetime sentence of a system that's built for you to be there is, in my opinion, reform isn't like, you can't fix something that ain't broke. The shit ain't broke. It's working quite fine. It's a well-oiled machine. Trillions of dollars being made every year. Mm-hmm. And until you tear it down and rebuild something different, it is what it is. So to go to your point, with Winning Ways, you can't win outside of yourself. You know what I mean? It starts here, and knowing that I got to do what I got to do to win outside and show the internal win and let that reflect outside is the way that anyone can win, include how y'all both win. You know what I'm saying? I think it's very important that we continue that mission to spread that as internal, because if you look externally, it's overwhelming, it's depressing. I don't know if it's depressing disorder, but it's depressing, the thought of it. And it's something that's there, and it is what it is. Staying stuck on it and trying to figure out how the system to help you is just a waste of time, in my opinion. And, I digress.
No, it's not a need for that. I mean, I definitely see your point. See, here's the thing. Back to Alyssa being sick and you asking me, like, what in me kept me going. You have to have that inner conversation that nobody's going to care more about me than me. Okay? There are people here that are willing to help. Don't get me wrong. We do it every day. But unless I'm willing to meet halfway, nobody's going to work harder for me than me. So if I want to go to school to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't have a car, I can't rely on the next person to give me a ride. But what I can do is look up the bus schedule and see what it's going to take me to get to the bus to get to school in order to finish. Anything that anybody does for me out of the norm that I can do for me is extra. That's great. It's welcomed. I'm not saying that it isn't. Same thing when it comes down to incarceration. What we do is we provide education. We provide different groups, the women's empowerment group, the men's empowerment group, financial literacy, things like that we provide as an agency on a regular basis. We do that part. Now, the people that we serve need to do their part.
Right.
And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that people are not incarcerated for reasonings that, whatever happened. Okay, what I'm saying is, as a society, provide them with the education and the knowledge that they need to make choices on their own, to do for themselves. I'm not saying give them housing. I'm not saying pay for school. I'm not saying that piece. But don't add the extra barriers to that piece.
Yeah.
Even playing field.
Right, that's all.
Even playing field.
And going back where really what in a nutshell comes up every single week on this podcast is that personal responsibility. Looking and saying what is in my control, and realizing, going back to what you said, that no one's going to care more about you than you. And what are you going to do about it? Right? Are you going to show up, or are you going to run? And it's so incredible how there's always two sides to everything, right? Because when I hear that, I get inspired. I'm like, yes, I can create my own path. I look outside, I see a playground, right? I do whatever. But in the same breath, that is the most terrifying thing, to be like, wait, no, there's nothing that is actually like, I'm the master, right? Like, that's terrifying. Yeah. To realize that, wait a minute. Yeah, we have these things in place, but they don't actually do what they say they're going to do. So I'm on my own. And that I find it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
that's tough, because you could be, if I, it was a long time I didn't love myself at all. Self-worth was in the basement, you know what I'm saying? And my mother's love and her faith is what pushed me through until I was able to muster up enough to start loving myself. And I think when people are going through that moment when they don't have nobody, and then you have to love you, but you don't have nowhere to draw that from. That's where the fear comes in, and you're terrified, because it's like I'm solo, and I don't even know if I'm worthy of any of this, rather than having that voice or that person or that YouTube video or whatever to tell you, yeah, you are worth it. So it's tough. Those are the parts where we have to do what we do to be that voice for those people.
And it's also, we're fighting biology in many ways, meaning whether we know it or not, the second we wake up to the second we go to sleep, the most important thing is staying alive. Mm-hmm. And that idea of being on our own is terrifying. Yeah. And that is the opposite of survival, right? That is the opposite of feeling empowered, and we go into, and then again, our brains work kind of bottom up, where that bottom primitive brain is saying you need to stay alive, and that top part of the brain, which would say, oh, wait a minute, if I look up the bus schedule and I find a way to get the bus, I find a way to get to all my classes and bring my daughter with me, there will be another door that will open. That is so, like, it takes practice to be able to use our top brain, right? To be able to think futuristically, and to have the patience and the discipline to allow this process to run its course, where our brain the whole time is just screaming, don't do that. Find the easy way. Find the easy way. Find the easy way. But the easy way is always going to be, my therapist always says, if you go and you try to push against the wall, right? Like, you're going to be met with the same amount of resistance, right? You're never going to budget. You're going to waste all your energy trying to push something that can't be pushed. Whereas if you come up to the wall and you recognize the wall, right? It's not about pushing it. It's not about moving it. It's just about recognizing that it's there. And I like that metaphor for me where, hey, I don't need to try to use brute force to get through it. I can recognize it, be aware of it, try to see my choices that I can use to move forward, and then try to slowly go with it.
Yeah.
But this is a challenging topic, and I know we as humans get caught up with that.
I think it's the fear of the unknown.
Without a doubt.
That is definitely, because as much as I can get on the bus, I can go to school. I can go to school for human services. The unknown is, what am I going to do with that after?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to do all this schooling because this is the right thing to do, right? They tell you, go to school, do all the things that are right. And then I get no job in human services. Now what?
That's
I did
what happened?
everything.
That's what happened?
No, that actually happened. I have, unfortunately, several degrees where my family makes fun of me that I've done everything but pass.
I think that's give me one. Give me two of them.
They said Camille's done everything except pass the bar. If I get motivated, maybe I'll do that later on down the line, but not right now.
I've been thinking about that myself. But
nah, it's too much schooling for me. I like to argue, but
yeah, I don't want to do all the research.
Yeah, I don't. No, it's just too much. But I went to school for computer graphics in Norwalk when I first got pregnant with Alyssa, and I fought through that degree, mainly because I was pregnant. It's hard. It's hard when you have a kid. It's hard when you're pregnant. But, the dean was like, well, you should take a year off, take a year off of school and because you have a new baby. It's your first baby. I said, no, I'll be back. And sure enough, I was back on time. And I graduated on time. And I took Alyssa in her stroller to class and things like that. But, I'm not doing anything in computer graphics. Not a thing. I could put a basic flyer together. But that's what I mean. It's like, okay, I went after this. It's so much money. And now what?
Yeah, no, the fear of the unknown is an all-consuming and incredibly powerful idea, right? And unfortunately, that's all it is, right? I love the acronyms for fear, and I'm sure I've said it before, but the false evidence appearing real.
What's the other one?
Well, based on that false evidence that we think is real, right? We have two choices: we can fuck everything and run, or we can face everything and recover. And I really like how that is broken down, because if I walk up to the edge of a cliff, right? Like, yeah, I should probably be a little fearful, right? And why is that? Well, this is a terrible example because I fell off a cliff, so that's a low hanging fruit, right?
I wasn't gonna say it, but
it's a low hanging fruit. But the idea is like, hey, we know you could have an accident, something bad can happen. So in that case, right, it's not necessarily false evidence. There's real evidence to support it. Yeah. But in going to school, right, and starting a new career, well, what is the evidence? There is no evidence, right? So it's something that my mind is making up, which is coming from a very protective standpoint, because if I don't try, I can't get hurt, or so I think, right? And if I'm actually able to push through that and unlock the next door, and this is where, I don't know if this is the right perspective to have, but it's certainly the perspective I take in my life, where you say, hey, what if I go through this process and then nothing comes from it? I don't fucking care. Who cares? Like, that doesn't actually matter, right? Because think about something that you started as big or small. Once you completed it, something new came from it. And in that moment, now I have something that's in my control. Now I have something that I can put my energy towards and work. So by going through the process and taking that leap of faith and going to school and putting in the work, who knows, just going back to the connections, who am I going to meet that might open up an opportunity for me? What places am I going to go to? Maybe a job opens up in another state and I go to that new state and this incredible life unfolds in front of me. But once we take it a step at a time, a day at a time, then that question can actually be answered. What am I going to do after, right? What if I can't get a job? So I don't know if that's like a healthy perspective to have, the who cares, but it's certainly something that I've been able to really practice in my life to get through scary things and try to stay as present as possible and not focus on the things that don't matter, right? Like something, and I know I'm probably going a little too much into this, but I always say when I'm working with clients, like, hey, if I were to look at my calendar right now and see all the clients I have after this and then see what my day looks like tomorrow and Monday, like I'm just going to want to get in the fetal position because it's so overwhelming. But when I really break it down, the only thing I can do is be locked into this conversation with you guys right now, right? I'm not going to be able to see my client and have this conversation. I'm not going to be able to do my day tomorrow and have this conversation and see my client, right? I can only do that one thing. So how do I let that go? Because I think for me, that's where fear comes from. For me, fear comes when I'm not locked into what I'm presently doing, and it's all these ideas that come up that don't really actually make much of a difference in real time if I really look at it. Yeah. I don't know that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, it makes sense. Ultimately, like when I went for grad, I think that's where mine's kind of, because I can't speak too much of anything. I'm like this professional college student, ultimately. But at that time in my life, you're looking at, I didn't know what my purpose was. You know what I mean? You culturally, here, this is the line you should walk. All right, this makes money, go here. But I didn't know what made me happy. So the degree in science, the degree in computer graphics, I think it was ENT at one point. I mean, there was so many different things. And between that, pharmacy, I'm just like, all right, Camille, you're doing all these different things. Like, what makes you happy at this point? So it's not until like human services came into, to play that I felt like I was a part of something that I can stand by and be okay. You know what I mean? And it made sense. And I'm not pretending like I know what I'm talking about. I kind of do.
Yeah, kind of. Sure.
So, I say it all the time. I just pretend. I play like I know what I'm doing on TV. That type of aspect. So.
Yeah, it's great how there's just always the common themes that come up, and one of them has always been purpose. And I don't know if through this podcast I have become more sure of the role purpose can play or more confused of the role it can play, and I'm leaning towards the latter, to be honest. Because at one point, I think having true purpose creates so much meaning. Right? But do you need purpose to create meaning? And that is kind of where we have so many individuals have this different take on purpose. Something that I do think and really came up when you said human service, where, how long have you been in the human service field for now?
2014 was my first job.
So eight years, like somewhere in that. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, what was your longest job?
Pharmacy. For maybe about 12 years.
Which also kind of is in the human service-y realm to a degree, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah. I kind of feel like it's like another cash cow. Yeah. Pretty much.
Oh, it is a cash cow.
It absolutely is. It's like the same, where you look at the society behind how the prison system is set up, and like it's set up so that people keep coming back because it's like free labor. Well, they give you medication so that it triggers something else, so you keep coming back for more prescriptions and things like that. Yeah. So,
yeah, that gets into a whole nother.
That's a whole nother.
Shout out to Dr. Matt Paterno. You should be here for this. Episode 17. Right? Yeah.
Something that I think is certainly where I think I'm really landing on is that persistence creates purpose. Staying with something creates this level of meaning. And maybe that's not the right word. Maybe I'm looking for meaning instead of purpose. But staying with it, doing something for 8 years, continuing to progress in school, not a large part of the population goes on to do a PhD, right? So this is something that I think, and I know in my life, that creates meaning, that persistence, staying with something despite the bumps and bruises, despite the left-hand turns when you think you're going right.
It's a garden.
It's a garden.
It keeps growing. You just know. So like
or not even that it keep growing. You can have a garden for 5 years, it can never give you nothing. But you keep watering it, keep tilling it for 5 years, you ain't getting nothing but weeds. Then year 5, bang. Or year 6, bang, you got some cherries popping up, some watermelons popping up, whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like that consistency. Keep on knowing. Well, that's faith. I learned faith in prison. Faith is knowing is going to happen no matter what. In prison, you know, and I ain't gonna go all into that, but one of the biggest things that I knew, I didn't know the name at the time, but I knew when it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I got that nonprofit book. No one could tell me I wasn't going to be a part of a nonprofit. No, it was when I met Ben. I didn't say it is something I wanted. This is what I'm going to do. You know what I'm saying? And I think with a garden, like, you know, it's going to come one day. It's going to come. You can't, I don't care what anybody says. At 11:59, at that last hour, they say you get executed at midnight. I know I'm going to get it in the governor car. You know what I'm saying? The governor called. Don't pull it. Don't get him off the chair. Get him off the lethal injection. He got an appeal. But that person knew. They knew. You couldn't tell them no different to the end. And I think that's what it's about with faith. Like, nothing, no matter how bad. And we talk about it in Buddhism. There was a Nichiren in Japan. They were getting stormed by all these ninjas, and he was like, "Yo, the ninjas was coming in, murdering everything." Yeah. And he was sitting in the castle like, "I'm good." And at the last minute, he was good. It's crazy. You know what I mean? Everybody else died around him, but he knew. You couldn't tell him nothing different. And I think that's when you have that faith and you start something and you believe in it, and no matter the ups and downs, you win. That's when it weighs. You stick with that shit to the end, you win, yo. The real always wins. No matter what. Even when the fake is, it look like the real loss and the fake is winning and they balling and you broke, you're gonna win it then. Stick with it.
Just gotta fix it.
And the definition of winning might shift along the way, but something is going to come from it. Something different is going to come.
Yeah.
Which then
The definition of winning comes in different levels,
Right.
and different, it's
Well,
not
outcomes.
always, it's not black and white,
Yeah.
I say it
For sure.
a couple times that, self-esteem, especially for women, can be a little hard to maintain. I say it all the time. People laugh at me. So I remember when I was a little kid, like little, that I couldn't see above my mom's dresser. So I remember it very, very clearly. Like, there is like Star Trek, I'm dating myself, on the TV.
We're the same age. So. You did us both.
I know. So Star Trek's
I'm
on the
not old.
TV. The lights in my mom's bedroom is off, but the kitchen light is on. So my mom is cooking. And this is the first time that I can actually look at the mirror. And I said, "Is this a joke? I can see myself." I thought I was the ugliest thing in the mirror. The ugliest thing in the mirror. I said, "Is God seriously? Serious?
Really?
This is what we're doing?" I was so mad. And from that point on, for a few years, I would not look in a mirror at all. So as I progress on, self-esteem can hit you hard. It allows people to take advantage of you. You find yourself in different scenarios and circumstances based on, just trying to find why you're here, and like any bit of love or acceptance and things like that. And so it'll put you in real awkward positions because you feel like why am I here?
Right. Why me?
Yeah. Like, why do I look like this? Why do I, why does my sister look this way and I look this way? And anybody who knows my family, like, me and my middle sister are complected differently. So they think that that's my friend and not my, sister. So it's like, here's Cassandra with the pretty hair and the brown skin, and I'm just Camille.
False, but yeah, both beautiful.
But
Shout out Big Head.
but ultimately, a lot of times, and then you deal with, I can laugh and be very secure about it now. My last name is Roach. Let's not pretend like I was not the in joke going in school and things like that. So it is a lot to fight through all of those hardships and know that I have a purpose. I just haven't figured out what that is yet. So there is like an end all. So like growing up, you have to fight self-esteem issues. You have to fight, bullying, in my case, bullying issues, and anything like that to make you strong enough to get to where I am at 37. To be like, listen, I don't care what you think about me. That's fine. That's your opinion. This is who I am. This is what I believe in, and stay strong to that. And it can be hard to do that sometimes in human services, because I feel as though human services, we get bowed down by funding. You know what I mean? It becomes a challenge to say that's not right and be the advocate for something that's right because a funding source might not agree.
Right.
It also goes back to what Kevin's saying, where it's, hey, the system's not broken, it's operating perfectly, right? And when you try to change that system, you get shut down by lack of funding to do so, because, hey, we already have the standard. We don't want to create any friction there, right? We don't want to we don't want to clog up that money wheel. And it really is unfortunate to say, and I would be remarkably ignorant to this had I not had firsthand experience in founding an organization that deals directly with these issues.
Right.
But when you see, right, hey, you have these dreams to make all these wonderful changes, and you're like, holy shit, there's no money for that unless you want to self-fund something. Right? There's no money for that. What's the money going to? Well, it's going to the status quo. So yeah, you transform an agency to the status quo, and then you start getting money. It becomes really hard to then chase those dreams. Yeah. Right? And it is a really hard, it's just a hard situation.
I liken it to the music industry, whereas you'll have an artist who's big and he signed to a major label, but that major label controls everything. They give him this advance money and they say, hey, you got to do all what we say, or we snatching that back. Where when you're independent, like we are, it's like we do whatever the hell we want. We own our own rights. We own our publishing. We own everything. You know what I'm saying? We'll make a distribution deal. You know what I'm saying? We'll collaborate with a big thing, but y'all don't own our rights. Y'all don't own shit. Y'all don't like it. Y'all can get out of here. We keep going the way we're going. And I think I know the nonprofit that I worked for. I worked for several, so I won't say that y'all worked for it or you did or didn't. You follow me? But I know I've seen nonprofits get funded tremendously, double their budget since the time I worked there, and the culture changed along with that. And that's my biggest fear. You know what I'm saying? For us to never change the culture of what we do. You know what I'm saying? Based off of the funding or based off of the
right. And
whatever.
that's where principles come into play.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Ethical standards.
And even I think principles are such an incredibly important things for everyone to take time to think about and have, because it's an operating manual. And principles, right, I can increase them, but ideally they don't change. They're the, when you go bowling and you have the bumpers, they're kind of the bumpers that keep me in line and make it so you can't sell out. Yeah. Right. So I really just surely hate to do this, and Kevin's gonna be pissed at me, but I gotta wrap up. Cause I gotta run, unfortunately. I
got an 18-year-old lunch as we speak.
Yeah.
I gotta go too.
Yeah.
But unfortunately.
So we like to ask every guest a final question on the Falling Up podcast. Mm-hmm. So if you were to be speaking with an individual who had just, fallen down in life and was in a really low spot and didn't know change was possible, what is one piece of advice you would give them?
I say it to my staff all the time, you have to do what's best for you. So what does the best for you look like? If you had things, forget money, If you had things the way you wanted to be, what would that look like? Now strategize on and place goals that you think would be beneficial for you to get there.
Sure.
Then sometimes you might have to label out that goal and then break that goal down
To smaller goals.
to smaller goals to build it. But until you can figure out what the life for you looks like that you want to live, not what your parents want to live, not what your spouse wants you to live, but you'll never come out of that rut that you're in because you're living for everybody else.
Starts with the vision.
You have to live for you. Again, nobody's going to care more about you than you.
I like that answer.
Well, Camille, I appreciate you. Thank you so
Absolutely,
much
guys.
for everything you do and being part of, not only my life, but Winning Ways life. And look forward to what the future has in store.
It's a separate family. This is my extended outside family. I say it all the time. I've never felt more accepted until.
Yeah, you do say that. The queen of winning ways.
That's right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in.
To the Falling Up Podcast.